Good afternoon, Israel Briefing family from all around the world. Thank you for joining me for today's edition of the Israel Brief. If you're new to it, I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, where you come to me for your top stories from Israel, hot off the press. You know, the kind that you're not going to see on Sky News and the BBC and all those mainstream media channels that are pushing a particular agenda. You're going to get it fresh and unfiltered as it happens here. Now, as always, the Israel Brief is brought to you by these guys, Lay of the Land, our very, very important and valued partners. Now, before we get into the headlines, a reminder, it is Wednesday, which means tomorrow it is Thursday. Yes, I know I am very impressive with my prowess on days of the week, but I say it for a reason, because tomorrow is the day that I announce this week's Mentions, Great People and Morons of the Week. And I like you guys to be a part of it. So please send me your mentions and morons via our social media or via our website. And also, if you have an audience question, and we have a very different kind of question today, please send it to me through the same mechanisms. Now, it is day 614. I know that all of you guys yesterday did a mitzvah, did a good deed. In the name of the hostages, may we merit the release of the 55 that still remain captive in the hells of Gaza. And I just want to give a shout out to all the wonderful people who shared messages in the last couple of days saying how they stand with Israel. It is so appreciated, guys. I don't think that there are enough words to describe how grateful we are when people share the love. I am a firm believer that we do have a lot of support around the world, and I can understand that people don't want to be vocal, given that members from the other side can be intimidating and violent. So those that are reaching out, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And for those who make comments on my looks and whatever, you know, to each his own. It is my firm belief that if you can't argue in fact and you have to resort to personal insults and attack, well, that says more about you than it does about me or the way I look. Anyway, let's get on with it, and we begin with our top story. And yesterday, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Norway announced that they would be imposing sanctions on Israeli ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. They say for their West Bank rhetoric. They have said that a lot of what they say is inflammatory and is inciting extremist violence. What these sanctions entail is freezing some personal assets as well as travel bans. Now, members of Israel's opposition as well as the United States have sharply condemned the decision by these countries to sanction these lawmakers. And I just want to say something. You know, the majority of us in Israel vehemently oppose the rhetoric that comes from Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. But this is not the way that allies deal with their friends, their allied countries. There are members of governments of the United Kingdom, of Australia, and various others who have said extremely inflammatory things about the state of Israel and about Jews. There are members of parliament in the United Kingdom who have said some really, really atrocious things. Richard Burgon is one that springs to mind. We can't forget some of the rhetoric coming from some of the other countries. And Israel hasn't acted. Israel hasn't sanctioned any of those MPs or lawmakers. And to treat a democracy like this, especially in times of war, is appalling. It's not to say that we all agree with what Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have to say, but there are ways of communicating your objections with your allies. Now, it wouldn't be a day this week where I didn't touch on the Goblin of Doom herself. Yes, Greta Thunberg. I know many of you are following the saga of the Greta and her cohorts from the Madeleine, or as I call it, the SS selfie boat. Greta landed in Paris yesterday, where she had been flown via El Al flight, and you can't make this up. She was actually seated right at the back of the plane near the toilets in a seat that couldn't recline. Poetic justice, that's all I'm saying, but somebody snapped some good shots of old Greta taking advantage of the onboard entertainment. Meanwhile, when she landed in Paris, she didn't waste any time speaking about how she was kidnapped and how she wasn't treated well. She was not allowed to shower, and she didn't get any sleep, and she didn't have a chance to say goodbye to people, and that she's not going to complain because the Palestinians are suffering far worse. Well, I can agree with her on the Palestinians are suffering far worse, and actually we saved them, Greta, from suffering more injustice by you going into Gaza. But I'd like to say something for a second. You weren't kidnapped. I tell you who was kidnapped and who is starving and who is tortured are the 55 remaining hostages. We know that Alon Ohel, who's been held captive, is going blind. We have seen the footage of Matan Angrest taken captive, beaten, and we know what they are doing to male soldiers who were taken and held captive. We know that at least 35 of our hostages were murdered either on the day or while they were in captivity. We saw what Eli Sharabi and Ohad Ben Ami and Or Levy looked like when they were exchanged in the hostage exchange. Emaciated, starved. Eli Sharabi said in an interview that he had zero body fat, that his doctor had never seen a body composition like this. Our hostages have spoken about how they haven't bathed in months, and if they're lucky enough to bathe, they get a bucket full of slop, of dirty water. You know who didn't get a chance to say goodbye to their families? Those that were murdered on the 7th of October and taken hostage, many of whom went to their death believing that their family members also were slaughtered. Do you know who hasn't had a good night's sleep in 614 days? The hostages and their families who are worried out of their minds, about the whereabouts of their loved ones. So please, Greta, cry me a river that you can sail your next diesel-based flotilla of virtue signaling up. And while you're at it, you dumped your cell phones and your laptops into the Mediterranean Sea. I hope our government sends you a massive bill for dumping toxins into our waters. But hey, you must have had something to hide. And speaking of that, you landed in Sweden just a short while ago. And when the press challenged you and asked you about the ties to Hamas and Hezbollah that those on board had, you said you couldn't be expected to know everything. You got a little bit uptight there, Greta. Well, you don't know anything at all, because you called the movie that the IDF were going to show you propaganda that you refused to watch. Well, you know what? Hamas, who your friends support, were the expert filmmakers as they filmed live their executions and tortures and mutilations and murder of Israeli civilians and other foreign nationals. They were gleeful. They were happy. You know, that movie plays over in our minds again and again and again on a loop, only with one difference. For us, it's not a movie. For us, it is reality. Shame on you. Shame on you and your cohorts for your performative virtue signaling. You are not a hero. You are not a hero, and you did not make a dent. What you did was embarrass yourself and exploit the Palestinians, many of whom are risking their lives to go and get the humanitarian aid that is given directly to them in order to circumvent Hamas, who were shooting them and stealing their food. Shame on you. How dare you? Meanwhile, 80 aboard the Gaza Fantasy Flotilla have refused to leave Israel and remain in custody, where they will go through the legal procedures to deport them. And one of these includes a French member of parliament. Now, just to reiterate, all who were on board the SS Virtue Signal, the Madeleine, were all given access to their consuls. Natapong Pinta, the Thai worker who was recovered by our IDF troops, whose remains were recovered in Rafah over the weekend, has been flown to Thailand, where he will be laid to rest. Natapong Pinta was amongst the hostages that were taken captive on the 7th of October. He was a worker at the Nir Oz kibbutz, and he was murdered in captivity. Yesterday, Israel held a very, very moving ceremony to honor his life and to give him the send-off to rest in eternal peace on his last journey that he deserves. Our condolences are with his wife and his family, and our thoughts and our prayers are with all of his loved ones and the people of Thailand at this time. And finally, last night, the IDF's air defense array intercepted a ballistic missile fired from Yemen towards where we are in central Israel. We could hear several interceptions. The IDF said they fired several interceptors because of the shrapnel, the damage of the shrapnel that comes through. And I must say, those sirens went on for quite a while, and we could hear some significant booms. I guess the world has forgotten that we Israeli civilians are in the line of fire nearly every single evening. Meanwhile, after months, a rocket was fired from the north of the Gaza Strip towards the Zikim area, setting off sirens close to Zikim Beach. That was intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome systems. So those are your top stories for today. I promise not to lecture anybody tomorrow, but somebody who prefers to remain anonymous wants to know what is a good book to read about that gives an accurate account of the 7th of October, some personal stories. So a book that I recently finished is called One Day in October. It is a collection of 40 stories of 40 individuals and families. It is a difficult read, a painful read, but also an inspiring read, because you hear people's individual stories of heroism and resilience. I can't for the life of me remember who the authors are, but it is called One Day in October, and I highly, highly recommend it, as difficult as it is to read. So those are top stories, guys. Don't forget to send me your mentions and your morons. And in the meantime, don't forget to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. Our YouTube channel is right here at The Israel Brief. We're on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks, on Instagram at Rolene_Marks, on X at Lay of the Land 5, and on Facebook at Lottel Site. Guys, God bless you all. I promise I'm going to kick my soapbox back under my desk, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye for now.